Hi, I'm Gavin Carlson, and this is Out of Bounds, Daily Bruin Sports Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Out of Bounds, the official sports podcast of the Daily Bruin. As always, I'm your host, Gavin Carlson, a fourth-year sports staff writer here at the Daily Bruin, and I have my two main men, Joseph and Jack, back on the pod. We're talking basketball today. Joseph, the sports editor, the boss, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm happy to be talking about some basketball as this season gets underway. Exciting times happening over at Pauley Pavilion.
Yeah, I think with the state of the football program, people keep repeating, it's basketball season, it's basketball season. Jack, senior sports staff writer, fourth year, is it basketball season, buddy?
Basketball, as my friend Joseph Crosby said last week about a different sport.
Yes, we were talking about basketball because...
Get your own bit, Jack.
Specifically...
You should be honored. That's inspiration right there.
Imitation is the highest form of flattery.
There you go. So. There you go. Absolutely. UCLA men's basketball today. They're 2-0. They have 3 wins technically, but one of them was an exhibition. We're doing this on a Monday. They have a game on Wednesday. This will be up before that. But I'd say a mixed start for this team, despite 2 huge wins, winning by 31 against St. Francis of Pennsylvania, and then winning by 18 against Lafayette. Obviously, 2 very different games in terms of game flow, and UCLA actually trailing in the first half for a lot of that game against Lafayette. But we're not going to break down every single play. Just big picture thoughts so far.
Vibes?
Question mark. Exactly. About this team so far. We didn't expect a fast start, right? We did not expect this team to be winning games by 50 points like the women's team. Make sure you watch our women's basketball pod. But is this kind of what you expected from the team so far?
Yeah, I think Mick Cronin is trying stuff out. He's mixing some different ingredients together, seeing what he can cook up. Cool. And he's still kind of figuring out what recipes are working best.
What that was amazing. Jack, go for it.
He's still at the store. He's collecting some ingredients still, I would say. I mean, he's got a lot of these guys together. Clearly, it's a very young and experienced team that's going to suffer certainly from the lack of veteran presence that it so benefited from these past few years.
Exactly.
And even with Adem Bona and Dylan Andrews back in the fold, and that Cronin has pointed to Adem as kind of the guy on the team this year. He's kind of the guy. He's the leader. Same thing with Dylan. I mean, he's now starting point guard, taking over from Tiger Campbell after 4 years. But yeah, I mean, that seems like that's the state of the team right now. It's exactly how we expected, pretty much.
Yeah, I think you brought up Dylan Andrews and Adem Bona. I think they both kind of had not polar opposite, but kind of opposite starts to the season in terms of Adem. The first 2 games looked phenomenal, right? The first 2 being the exhibition and the season opener in that doubleheader. Maybe not his best game against Lafayette. Meanwhile, Dylan Andrews kind of does the opposite, where at least in the eyes of Mick Cronin, not the best game for him in the St. Francis game. Much better performance, leading the team in scoring in the Lafayette game with 18 points.
7 of 9 on shooting, which is really impressive.
I think we talked about it in the season preview. Obviously, you kind of expect Adem to be at least an above-average player in every single game. And what's going to be the difference for this team is obviously the development of the freshmen, Adaimara, Berke Busenberg. Yes, what he said. But it's going to be Dylan Andrews, right? The point guard of this team. College basketball, you got to have a point guard. And Tiger Campbell just brought such a sense of security every single game, knowing you're not going to turn the ball over. You're not going to be Kirk Kriisa with Arizona, throwing the ball around, making turnovers. Sorry for that stray there. But, you have that security with Tiger Campbell. Dylan Andrews, more of a wild card, right? There's no other way to put it. Not as,
just untested. Not
as conservative with the ball, a little more, I think has a higher upside than Tiger Campbell just in terms of explosiveness.
He plays more aggressively, obviously. He's a younger guy. He's trying to temper his aggression with, obviously the more sensible Cronin archetype.
Right. He's trying to be the guy that, or presumably trying to be the guy that Mick Cronin needs him to be.
Yeah.
Precisely, yeah.
And I think you can expect Mick to mention Dylan Andrews' name in every single press conference after a game, because I think he's going to be very focused on how Dylan plays. He gave him a shout-out, said he was a lot more, what you wanted to see from him in terms of shot selection, knowing when to shoot, knowing when to pass. Like he did say, I think the Lafayette game was very interesting because offensively and defensively, this team saw kind of a matchup they're not going to see very often. Lafayette on offense, basically 5 out, a lot of threes, a lot of perimeter play. And then on defense, kind of the opposite, daring UCLA to shoot, like Mick was saying. And so I think it took some time for the team, obviously, offensively, to kind of figure out are we just going to shoot a bunch of threes because they're telling us to, or are we going to still work the ball inside? And then what he said after the game was defensively staying with 2 bigs despite going against 5 perimeter players and almost costing them, at least in the first half. What do you think of that decision to kind of maybe risk a loss, or not really risk a loss, but kind of have a first half where you're losing a decent amount of the game just because you're trying to work with bigs and everything?
I think if the game had ever gotten more out of hand than it did early in that first half, you probably would have seen an adjustment from Mick a little sooner.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he was probably thinking something along the lines of like, oh, we're only down by like 3 or 4 points. I can still afford to have these guys go out there and do this.
Right.
And so maybe he just wanted to see like a full half of that kind of game, or at least as much as he could until he needed to put more guys in and like play from behind a little bit. Because then they switched it up in the second half and things just it was out of hand. I think the game ended with UCLA on a 27-5 run. Like they were considerably better in the second half. And that was just as a result of changing the rotation.
Yeah, I think it was clearly Mick's got a lot of trust in these guys, even despite obviously the season being so young. And he's willing to kind of experiment at this point and accept those kind of risks that he's taking. I think maybe you could argue maybe he pushed a little bit. I mean, the team was trailing at halftime, still trailing until around the 15th minute in the second half. As Joseph mentioned, they'd go on a 27-2 run, I believe is what it was. That's what I saw earlier. But clearly, I think this team was able to find its offense. It took them a while to, but they did find some offense, and I think Mick will continue to show more trust in his guys going forward.
Yeah, I'm putting a lot of kind of emphasis on what Mick was saying at the end of that game, because I think we're all kind of curious to see how he's going to handle all these unknowns, and I think we're even more so in the game. Ironically, I think we're getting more of a vision of what he's going to do based on what he's saying. He said after the game that Adai, he's like, you just get him the ball. He said he's more skilled than Adem. He just came out and said that, which is probably true, but it's just interesting for a coach to say Adem is the best player and then say this guy that we've seen 2 games of is already more skilled.
Mick's very blunt.
Yeah, he is. It makes it easier for
nice.
A fan or a member of the media.
Understand everything.
Yeah, and so I think in these games coming up, they have Long Island University. We're expecting another blowout game there. But then you have the Maui Invitational, and you're playing real teams. Marquette is a great team. Then Kansas would be next, most likely. We're going to learn a lot about the young guys, right? I think we're going to see it. I think that's why we're seeing 2 big lineups in games where you shouldn't be playing 2 big, because you're going to have 2 big lineups against Marquette and Kansas, and you better hope that Adai or one of the Williamses is able to help out Adem in the post there. We don't really need to talk too much about Long Island. I think we're expecting a win. Do we? Any shocker picks here?
No.
LIU by 10?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
For perspective, LIU went 3-26 last year. Wins are against Sacred Heart, Purchase,
like the verb.
It's a college, Gavin. They have to play colleges in basketball, And then of course
can't play parts of speech.
And then national powerhouse Mount St. Vincent.
Mount St. Vincent. Oh yeah.
It's a game they're gonna win. I think at this point between now and the start of the Maui Invitational, it's like, when is Berke gonna get cleared to play?
That is
because that's the one missing link, at least at this point, in terms of what we have yet to see or start to see glimpses of.
You kind of stole my next thing as we're finishing up this episode.
I do the segues now.
Does this team need Berke to beat Marquette?
Yes.
Yep, definitely.
Will we see Berke? I mean,
I don't know. I'm not the NCAA.
I don't think
I'm the wrong person to be asking that question, Gavin.
I'm sure that, obviously UCLA is pushing very hard for this, but I'm sure they're pushing extra hard to have him by, I think they'd love to have him by Wednesday so we can play a game before he has to go play Marquette in Hawaii. We'll see. I don't know. We're recording this on a Monday. We don't know if Berke will be cleared. We'll just real quick rapid fire thoughts on Marquette. One of the best teams in the country. They're ranked number 4. Great guard, great coach in my opinion. Is UCLA going to struggle in this game? It just feels like they're not there yet.
Probably
right? To compete with a team like this.
This is a good get your feet wet for all of the freshmen of like, this is what it's like to play in the NCAA tournament. This is what the Pac-12 is like. This is what the Pac-12 tournament is like. This is a way of giving them that really early experience so that then when, they play the rest of their non-conference slate, they can look back on it and be like, oh, this part of the game was harder against Marquette. And then when, conference play rolls around, tournaments roll around, they have that experience so they're not fully raw.
Yeah.
It's definitely be a reality check. I mean, we're going to see UCLA actually go against a quality basketball team. As you said, Gavin, well coached, clearly highly ranked. They're number 4 right now. And at the end of the season last year, too, they were showing quite a lot of potential. This is a team that we knew was going to be good going into the season. And so it's going to be a good test for UCLA and with Kansas as well, certainly.
Ken Pom 11 for all my Ken Pom enjoyers.
Oh, yeah. There'll be plenty of Ken Pom references.
I'm a big Ken Pom guy.
One thing I'll say, we saw last year with this team being UCLA, no question marks in terms of the start for them. 3-0, 4-0 if you count the exhibition. They beat Concordia by 30, Sac State by 26. My math doing this very quickly. They beat Long Beach State by 24, and then a 30-point win against Norfolk State. Obviously, a very experienced team, one of the highest-ranked teams in the country. Then they go to their first real test of the season. They lose to Illinois and they lose to Baylor back-to-back. So, I mean, if they're doing that last year with an experienced team, I don't think there should be very high expectations that they're going to shock a Marquette or a Kansas when they couldn't even, not hang, but they couldn't beat an Illinois or Baylor last year with a much better team at that point in the season. So I think, just quick thoughts. I think we're expecting at least losses to Marquette and Kansas.
I wouldn't. I would pencil it in as a loss, but I wouldn't pencil it in a way that's like a devastating loss. Right. It's just it's a learning loss. It's a very much a learning opportunity. Yeah, and that's what I think they're going to approach the game as.
This team is not competing to be ranked number 10 in the country going in March Madness. They're competing to be a solid team throughout the Pac-12 schedule to compete for that title, but more so compete for the Pac-12 tourney and be playing better basketball.
Just be ready to play that level of basketball at that point in the season.
Exactly.
So 3-4 games in, they're not going to be playing Marquette level of basketball.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe they shock either Marquette or Kansas. I don't see it happening, but I think that's a good way to end this episode. UCLA, not the biggest game on Wednesday against Long Island, but then 2 huge games coming up in the Maui Invitational. As always, UCLA Daily Bruin on YouTube for the video version of this podcast. To see the hair, can you see the brains? Because you're the brains of this podcast. Can you see the brains?
Gavin, you can't see brains.
Fair enough, but that's the brains.
It takes the brains of the pod to tell Gavin that you can't see brains.
The brains, the hair, and the guy who just talks a lot, I guess. UCLA Daily Bruin on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud to listen. DailyBruin.com for everything. Articles, football, basketball, every other sport you can think of, we've got it. So please support us. And that'll do it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching. UCLA men's basketball. Big couple of games coming up. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.